So I've covered on a lot of shows on this channel, hence even making such elongated reviews on them, going extremely in depth and just yapping whatever I have to say. And it's just been in my passion to share with y'all shows that I watch and express my opinions on them. But I've been really just clamoring on this video idea where I sum up where my thoughts are on them collectively. And what better concept than ranking the shows that I've reviewed on this channel. Now, before I get into it, there are some decisions I had to make to properly put together this list, where pretty much majority of the shows I've covered are all kids shows. I decided to make that the niche. So in other words, I decided not to include the Amazing Digital Circus on the list because it would just bother me to put an anime show targeted for a mature demographic alongside kids shows where it would obviously overtake a lot of them, where honestly if this was on the ranking it would be near the top. And I think just piecing it with shows that are not of the same target demographic just feels so unbalanced. So I decided to just leave this off. And also I decided to not include the Total Drama reboot, where yes, I technically did make a video covering on it, but I never actually did a full-blown review, like an analysis and in-depth discussions on episodes beginning to end. And I feel like on this list, I wanted to pertain it to shows that I've done in-depth reviews on. So while I'll say this show would have been definitely high, I think it's because it is remiss of the thing that the shows on the list have. I decided just screw it, don't put it on. So with that out of the way, the list will be pertaining to these 8 shows that I've made elongated reviews on, and just ranking them solely based on my personal attachment and enjoyment with them. And anyways, here is my ranking of all the shows that I've done full-fledged reviews. Starting with number 8 at the bottom. This show, I have numerously expressed my frustrations with it, and it's just driven me so out of my interest to continue on talking about it. It's Rubble and Crew. Look, the series itself, just in general, is mid to me. I don't think it's entirely bad, but also not entirely good. The first season started off just fine for me, but then we got to the subsequent seasons and they just start getting more drier than a paint that's drying on a trash can. Like, I've talked about how severely checked out I've been with this series, or I mean, it being a spin-off to Paw Patrol, which is obviously better than this, even though I don't personally think the franchise itself is the most upper echelon in my books. It just still comes with such massive holes and very middling pacing, mixed with such repetitiveness displayed across majority of its episodes that I just feel like it doesn't offer much elsewhere. The humor it has just doesn't hit for me. Though I'll say, there is one particular character who is definitely, I would say, the saving grace for the show. That being Wheeler. I feel like he's basically the Marshall of the series, being the one who brings somewhat the comedic relief to the table, always having such funny gags and glowing moments. And like, I feel like his energy is what resonates with me the most amongst his family. Like, I feel like he's the one good character from the show, while everyone else doesn't do much for me. Rubble with himself continues his own trope, though while we get some more depth with him because he now takes the main spotlight, I just don't really care. Charger is way too much of a ham. Mix is bland. Motor is fine, just purely affable. Crane and Grovel are just there. And then this series, I guess, would be antagonist Speedmeister is quite awfully one of the worst characters ever. Like, the show hams him up way too much to just dunk on him, and it just gets stale with absolutely no growth to his character that I feel like there's nothing positive about him to elicit. This is of course the fundamental issue, is that my experience with the show, it feels like it's more driven for one particular character in Wheeler, and I don't even invest into the main premise of them being pups who are constructing things around Builder's Cove, which then again, I pretty much feel like I got that core vibe from the old school Bob the Builder, which is way better than this. Like, overall, the show is mid. I don't see myself growing onto it in the future, and I might as well make my announcement here in this video. I decided I'm not going to be covering the show anymore. It's just not worth my time, and also considering that it's probably going to be most of the same of me just constantly criticizing the flaws of the show, it's probably going to just get old at that point, and plus the reviews don't really reflect the algorithm that well either, so I'm best to just let go of reviewing this series any further. I hope y'all can understand where I'm coming from with this, but yeah, across all the shows that I reviewed on, this one easily has the worst writing, humor, and just overall pacing that just feels so surface level, and that just doesn't work for me. Moving on to number 7, the book Hungry Bears. Now, despite its low placing on this specific list, the gap between this and Rubble and Crew is widely massive, so I want to get that point out across. But this show is a pretty cute show involving 4 bears who hunt for books to read and learn morals and other sort of life lessons that also reflect on events and issues in that respective episode too, based on where it is themed. And that concept alone is okay. It's not entirely groundbreaking, but it's just the purity with the characters who make it more immersive impressive that can build on the connection people have with the show. Speaking of, I like how the 4 characters have different diverse personalities that make them so distinct. Boomer is absolutely a favorite of mine. Great lively energy, and even at times that he tones it down, he is incredibly endearing and has some very comical moments that have greatly lingered in my mind. Crystal is decent, definitely the brains of the group, though one episode does counter that against her character. Melody is quite the expressive one, always having to do that imaginative vibe, and Scout is that soft innocent one who pretty much tackles a lot of the exploration on the show. It's like the strength this show really has is the characters themselves, who you feel like you embrace with. Their dynamic with each other takes a lot to heart. Their adventures to hunt for books and exploration around different settings in their world is just interesting to see. I mean, the whole paper aesthetic is unique in their own ways. While we'll say there is some questionable design, at least it's a show bringing something in a style that reflects upon the theme of the show's premise, and it is an awesome way that they give a nod to it. Now, as modern the show is, I have to admit that it is widely unnoticed, but you could go on popular social media sites and you can see that there are barely any mentions of the show at all. And I think the quality of the show just not really hitting that tier of recognition is a major aspect of its lower placement on the list. But plus, within the scope of the show, there are some things I'm contested with, like the opening theme of the show, not the greatest in the world, definitely could have been tweaked a lot better. Some parts of the show did cringe me in ways, and that's not great. And the show doesn't really hold up much for me as we move past it, which makes me a strong implication to its lack of recognition in the cartoon field. I still do find it to be an underrated, endearing show. Love all the characters and the different traits they have, and they hold up good with the moral lessons they exude in each episode. Number 6. Spirit Rangers. The first thing I will say that this is a strongly satisfying modern show that comes with almost to no negativity surrounding it. It focuses on 3 young indigenous children who have the ability to transform into spirit forms, and it is a cool concept that while we've seen numerous times on other shows, I just like enjoying the concept overall and how the characters navigate with it. And the premise of the show being somewhat on par with book hunters, with the theme of exploring life lessons and morals, though with a more adventurous role that pertains to a thriller energy that it entails. Spirit Rangers just stood out to me with how strong the series was from beginning to end, and it just makes so much sense to me that my enjoyment just stems from the culture of them all, tackling upon indigenous writing and the perspectives that speaks to me a lot with its storytelling, and with also the musical genre that they integrated here. It just works for me. The siblings alone with their family relationship makes for the fun of the adventures on the show, and that's not without the concept of them trying to keep the spirit formers a secret from their own community, and their parents in particular just feeling so unaware of what's been going on despite the evidence pointing to it. Felt a lot, but hey, made for an interesting narrative for whenever they would make their discovery. The 3 siblings of Cody, Summer, and Eddie's dynamic just take up so much capital for the series. I mean, it really works seeing how they work together to resolve the issues that are happening within Spirit Park and Zeus Park, and them as characters have their own interesting traits. Well, I have to put it this way, that there are some trope followings they have, especially with like the sibling molds, with like the typical eldest, middle, and youngest sibling archetype. It does still carry on a dynamic that is interesting to see play out with them. The culture of the native and the exploration and impact that comes to play holds up very well, especially for how it really represents the indigenous community and gives such informed perspectives to the audience to learn too. And that definitely works for me. A modern TV show that is awesome, but in my personal taste, when grouping it with the others on the list, I just feel like I have less of the attachment to this compared to the others above. So sadly, it does have the misfortune of being pretty low on this list, despite my own positive reviews and my belief of this being a solid kids cartoon in our contemporary ages. Next to number 5. Knuckles. This spin-off was so bizarre. Like, obviously from Paramount Sonic, it is a very strong franchise. However, it does not come without its flaws, and this show just focusing on Knuckles definitely epitomizes a heavy load of flawed elements that makes it so bizarre with the direction that the series went. Now, putting it this way, this show obviously centers around the concept of Knuckles struggling to find some ground in the Earth environment. So after learning of Wade, who is in a competition going through his own issues, he makes an apprentice to become a warrior so he could be able to overcome his challenges and win a huge tournament at the end. It's on paper not entirely a bad plot line, especially if we're serving some dividends for Knuckles' impact. However, that's being conjunction with him just falling into the background when we continue on the series and Wade ending up taking his spotlight out of his son. Now, I'm not against us trying to grow ourselves more on Wade as a character, but it could have been executed more efficiently if we were able to balance out their screen time together. Like, despite those issues, the whole wackiness and whimsical vibe I get from the the show is just very enjoyable to me, and there is some strong action that it's able to fill up. Like again, that's the Sonic franchise for you, and this show did not forego any of that. But it's not without its issues with like some of its execution on the writing and the minimal screen time for characters who are very important to the series. Like Knuckles himself obviously should have been gleaned on more, but I guess from production having to animate him, they had to save budget, which okay I guess, but there could have been adjustments made too. The agents and the buyer, where they are framed as the threat against our characters, are just in and out of the picture, reducing what could have been a much more vital impact on the series. Now, despite those things, I did find myself enjoying a lot of this series. I didn't personally watch it when it first premiered. I went ahead and finally watched it over a year later, and it was a very thrilling story to follow along. And for what it's worth, the opening theme, playing the famous 80s song Warrior by Patti Smith, was a great vibe because I always emanated with that song. And you know what? Let's take a quick second to relive some of that vibing. Yeah, this is one strong series to follow along if you really enjoy a lot of wackiness it has. Gosh, 2024 was that year that brought the vibe. Knuckles as a character, I'm really starting to grow on him. Even though he's unmatched to Tails, who is easily my favorite from any sort of Sonic media, Knuckles isn't that too far behind. So credit to his counterpart in this particular series that expedited his aura. Alright, on to number 4, Dragons Rescue Riders. Like, I gotta say it, I really do like this show a lot more than most people do, and by those, I am mostly referring to the How to Train Your Dragons fanbase, since there's quite a bit of a mixed bag reception that it gets from them. I'm definitely not on the hate bandwagon that I personally think is a bit haywire in the grand scheme of things. The show mainly focuses on 2 adopted children who were raised by dragons, which is why they are able to speak dragon, which the whole concept alone of dragons being able to talk was a very curious choice. Now obviously it was kind of a big controversy with this show. However, I'm not opposed to that concept. Mostly, I think it's a very nuanced sort of distinction for this show, especially when it is built to target a much more younger audience. I mean, just the premise alone with these twins and their dragon friends embarking on adventures, protecting other species and rescuing those who are in danger, that's your kind of premise that you're gonna get from the show. Dak and Layla are decent enough protagonists to follow along. I mean, I think Layla in particular is way more versatile and level-headed, basically being the team's leader as everyone is pretty much independent under her commands. On the dragon side, Winger, he is my treasure. He is basically the counterpart to Toothless. As I'm one who grew up with Toothless, Winger is my appeal. The meta, the goat of all dragons in the franchise. Nah, just kidding on that last part, but still, you get it. Winger is the heart of the show for me. Summer's good, has that good sisterly mode in her. Aggro is affable, has her moments to glow. Cutter is a prankster, and to be fair, some of his moments don't work for me because it can be cheesy, but hey, at least we need a source of conflict. And then Purple, okay, not the biggest bond for Purple. He just comes off tropey, especially with his juvenile humor that just breezes past over my head. Kind of like Rubble in a way. And speaking of, it feels like a lot of the reception from the show is that it's basically a Paw Patrol knockoff just with dragons, and I could see various angles to that, but dare I say, I think the show is probably even better than Paw Patrol itself. We do get a really diverse amount of adventures, and it's not usually following a repetitive tradition in each episode, which is nice to see fleshed out. Plus, the intricate theme of teamwork and the chemistry between our team are very interesting in my eyes. And you know what? As much as this show is basically a watered down version of the original Dragons franchise, hey, it's non-canon, so it doesn't ruin any of its legacy counterparts at all. The show may be not suited for everyone, and that's totally understandable. And for me, the show is not one I grew up with and has massive holes, but I still enjoyed it more than most people do. So if you could already tell, the remaining 3 on the list were shows that all premiered in the early 2000s. Because as someone like myself who was born in that time frame, I was drowned with so many of these 2000 shows that were just pure gold for me. And so with that, it does make the list narrow down to such easy choices for the top 3. And I'm gonna have to get this out of the way. If you had watched my top 5 cartoon show video that I made a year ago, then you'll probably have a sense with how the remaining of the ranking will go. But I'm still gonna go over it anyway, just in brief. So next up at number 3, Toopy and Binoo. This is a show that focuses on this dynamic duo between a mouse and a cat who embark on imaginative adventures, which that premise alone is just your average narrative for these kind of shows. But Toopy and Binoo have such a dynamic energy coming into it. I mean, the whole focus on their relationship is just empowering to me. With how much they kind of serve as polar opposites, with Toopy just being very dim-witted and impulsive, while Binoo serves as the more level-headed thinker of the two and has a more logical thought process. It makes their partnership alone just very compelling storytelling, where in most ways it's kind of like a balanced scale. As a whole, this being a Canadian show and me growing up as one, it's like our need to watch cartoon shows, but the caveat to watch this one as part of our Canadian culture, it makes things very resonating. And I think the whole theme with the wholesome style of the show is a huge boon to my enjoyment out of it. It has some satisfying tropes and storytelling, a dynamic duo who are extremely exuberant, who define as the charisma of the series. Format-wise, it's radically different from the others on the list, since every episode, aside from the mini-movies, are extremely condensed and we're pretty much rushing through an episode like that. It is unique on the offset, but it also reduces a lot of the material we could have for a longer form fleshed out story. And this is what makes a great appeal when they decide to do the mini-movies, where they forego the shortened format and actually made more of a lengthier format, plus adding in more characters who have dialogue just like Toopy branches out a more dynamic feeling too. For my sakes, Toopy and Binoo is easily one of the greatest cartoons I grew up with in my personal books, while there can be some points to qualm with. In my opinion, it's definitely nowhere near one of the worst shows at all. Contains a very whimsical theme, has an intricate dynamic storytelling, and it holds up greatly because of its Canadian roots. And then for number 2, The Wonder Pads, which I had recently just rewatched as a necessity for the retrospective video that I made. But how to really describe this? The show is a vibe. I will fully go into that. It's filled with such astounding thrill and provokes a very immersive feeling to it, which can be pertained to the musical aspect of the show. It is very catchy. The premise focusing on 3 class pets who travel around the world to save animals who are in trouble. A pretty simple premise, yes, but the characters themselves take in the charm and humor with the journey that makes a more immersive experience this show has. Linny is obviously a personal favorite of mine, being that lead role and just following her own sort of tropes that I love within a character. Tuck is like a go-to comfort character, and he often just sparks fun curiosity that aligns very well with the audience. Mei Ming is definitely the biggest source of conflict that this show has, with the bevy of sass and her constant rebuttals that does work for humor, though there is those points that they get overblown as she can really come off terrible in those spots. But as well out the question that she's what brings the silver lining to the table. One of my favorite and probably the most iconic mantra that this show focuses on is the teamwork values, because in Lindy's own words, what is always going to work? Teamwork. And we see that numerous times just get recited on when the characters sought for problem solving. And it's pretty unique to his animation. It has a very intricate photo puppetry element, whereas of the textures of real life species that the characters would be portraying. And it's cool how that's drawn upon into the media. It makes for a very appealing aesthetic that feels very fresh and different from most other shows in its time. And having just lately rewatched the entire show, it had really propelled itself on its ranking for me, not on this list, but that other list that I had made long ago where I ranked it at 5. And now it definitely is a step above of what it was ranked at number 4. And I think because it's a lot more cohesive of a show that draws upon my intrigue. Wonder Pets to me is a top tier Nickelodeon show, and that's without saying how much the musical parts to it gives a nice bolster, because in a world where you need that moment to groove and vibe, you are immersing yourself in this environment. Number 1, the best show that I review on this channel, The Backyardigans. No surprise, the first ever show that I fully reviewed on this channel. For the record, and this show is by far just pure greatness on every kind. The show focusing on 5 creatures who use their shared backyard as an exploration of their imaginative world. The entire atmosphere of the show is on the spectacle, reflecting on strong Nickelodeon TV back when it was good. A lot of what makes this sophisticated is the dynamic feeling of the show, the characters having such strong chemistry with one another, and every one of them has a role that brings such a heart to the franchise. I mean, just to vividly illustrate each of them, Pablo is that beloved frantic penguin with such a bevy amount of memorable enthusiasm that is very rewarding to have on the show. Uniqua is a unique character in her own ways, appearing in every episode and just being such a top-notch adventurer. Austin plays such a relatable role to me and embodies the character development of the show. Tasha is no slouch with the entertainment value she brings, and Tyrone is such a chill guy who has such an innocent demeanor that you just attach to his cordiality. The one key component that everyone should all know about this show is the musical facet, because going into the thick of it, it was such a graceful feature to have in every episode to feel a vibrant energy. The music is extremely catchy, and they play such a diverse amount of genres that it makes the creativity level on its head. But you got the song Into the Thick of It, Castaways, those were the viral ones that took place on TikTok, but there's other ones that you could really appreciate more if you listen to it in the likes of like Row Your Boat, On Top of the World, Dance for Your Life. Like, it's such a sensation that such a blessing to get, let alone the adventurous premise that this show entailed. And this show is a practical reason of my development on this channel, motivating me to really denote myself to cover more animated shows that I have watched and give my personal critiques on them too. For Nickelodeon in its older ages, this is by far one of the epitome of peak content back in its day. No matter what, the Backyardigans really excel itself to its capacity, held up so strongly for me from when I was a kid, and my rewatch of it if not elevated the hold up for me even more, sparking so much nostalgia and even pulling my heartstrings where I felt a full range of emotions. It sucks that when they tried to reboot the show in honor of the death of the creator, they just totally slam dunk on us, which is shameful, but that isn't gonna stop from what its successful predecessor brought. The show is the GOAT, and easily in my own personal book is deserving of #1. This is where my opinions land here. Feel free to comment down below which show was your favorite that I have covered on this channel. And I'll definitely make it the necessity to continue on making a coverage on that respective show. But that's where I'm at. I'm going to sign off here. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you all in the next video.